So we're definitely dealing with a very difficult job market right now. You can see all these type of headlines I'm going to cover in a few clips. This guy has got fired from Microsoft. We've got instances where there have been layoffs at Meta, Microsoft, Workday. Meta, we're going to go into more details about Meta or Facebook, where they've laid off 4,000 employees, and just show you how tough the job search is in tech specifically, but generally speaking too. We're going to hear from a few different people's stories. Let's start with this guy who worked at Microsoft. And just before we do, if you relate to the stories here, you're looking for a job, I'm someone who works as a career coach. Meta dumped thousands of workers, as we're going to go over here, even top workers. Top performers are considered disposable. The system continues to collapse, right? Now, I spent over 10 years working at Goldman's, Morgan Stanley, HSBC in sales and trading. I know exactly how it works when it comes to layoffs, promotions, the job search, salary negotiations, and I've played it all out from an intern, entry-level employee, all the way up to director level. Let me know if you want to work with me. There's a link in the description, and I look forward to speaking to you soon. Let's start with this clip.
Just got laid off from Microsoft. This is certainly not the kind of content I ever intended to post on here. I just made this account for my Twitch and gaming content, but I figured I'd talk about it because I don't know what else to do right now. I literally just got an email last Wednesday saying my position was to be terminated immediately and I was to stop doing the work that I was doing. And I think the thing that pisses me off the most about this is I moved across the country for this job, right? I moved literally from the east coast of the US to the west coast, a 45-hour drive. I left friends and family. My wife had to leave a job that she liked and really enjoyed, and I've only worked here for 7 months. It hasn't been a full year yet. That feels like huge business oversight, right? To say, oh, we need the budget for this person, we have the budget to hire this person, and then 7 months later be like, oh, we can't afford them anymore, it's too much money. And I still get 2 to 3 months of severance pay, so that's nice at least. And I was told it wasn't performance based, but like, I had special clearance access on my team, so I'm the only person that could do some of the work I was working on, and I was told it was a high priority. I guess nobody can do that work now. There's a deadline coming up in like 2 months, but like how there was no reasoning behind it. And even my boss was fired, and I talked to my boss's boss. He doesn't have a reason for why I was like, there's no reasoning. Nobody knows. It's crazy. And I've only worked here for 7 months. Why the fuck did they hire me in the first place? I guess I just start looking for other jobs now. And maybe try to continue with the Twitch stuff or whatever. See how that goes. But just kind of venting a bit, I guess. I don't know. I'm just kind of pissed off that this job made me move across the country and they only kept me around for 7 months. I don't know, it feels a little messed up.
See, sometimes it can get quite difficult. You see with this guy here. Now, the whole point is, firstly, I think he mentioned he worked at Microsoft. He'd been there for about 7 months and then he was laid off, even after he had to relocate for the job. It's not like he was just working in his local town or local city. He had to move across the country to get this job. Now, this is the type of thing, often you'd see mental breakdowns of women who'd be on TikTok crying about a layoff or about the financial situation and how difficult it is now. And I think it's interesting when I see a bit more clips going viral of men who are venting too, because typically as men you have more emotional control, and it shows me in a sense how bad the economy is when more and more men are, I wouldn't say crashing out, but I've seen other worse cases than this where they'd be really venting on social media. And the one thing I'd be careful, of course, you don't want to burn bridges, complain too much about a particular company, especially when you're naming them, because future recruiters, hiring managers, everyone's using social media now. Maybe not everyone's using TikTok, but they might be using YouTube, and they might see something like this and see who's not a good person to hire if you're complaining. But I've seen people complain on LinkedIn posts. So just be careful of struggle posting, because it might not look too well. You're doom posting, trauma dumping, victim venting online. Just be careful of that, even though you might have a valid point. Now, what's crazy about these companies is the fact that he relocated and after 7 months he lost his job. And I've seen situations like that where people either relocate or they start a job and then all of a sudden they're going through job cuts, and then within a year you lose your job. And it's not because you did anything. It's just they hired you when they're already planning on making job cuts. So it's like they hired you, they made job cuts to other people, and you think, oh, I just joined, it's not going to impact me. And then within a year, you lose your job too, not because you did anything wrong, just because the job cuts kept expanding until they included people they just hired a few months ago or less than a year ago. And this is how ridiculous it gets, right? Companies don't take into account how inefficient they are, because I'm sure the company actually probably paid him a bit to relocate to the new location. I assume he maybe moved from one state in America to another state or one city to another. They must have paid some kind of bonus when he joined to relocate. They typically have a budget, depending on how big the move is, of maybe 5 to 10,000 or more. I've seen companies where they offer you $20,000 to move from one location to the other, or one country to the other, to get you started. So you can rent somewhere when you start there and then find a longer term place to live. This is the type of things you have to take into account, like when you're doing jobs, but also how disloyal these companies are and how they treat you like trash. Because I'm sure now he's left Microsoft, he's got that on his resume, even though it's just 7 months. Let's say he worked at some other good companies. It might not be that difficult for him to find his next job, but it'll still deal with that trauma on a daily basis. And everyone knows what it's like when you deal with a layoff. Anytime you work somewhere else, there's always that constant fear, oh, I might get laid off here. Am I good enough for the job? Those are reoccurring thoughts people get, and we can't pretend that isn't real. That psychological impact going through a divorce or something like that, it does weigh on you in future relationships or future jobs. And the thing is, it's more common than you think, right? A lot of people are going through layoffs or unemployed and they're just not making it apparent because they want to maintain their dignity or self-respect. They don't want people looking down on them. The point I'm making is, if you're in a difficult spot, don't worry about it too much because it is more common than you think. I wouldn't get too depressed about it. And there's also this thing about people think if they work harder or if they've got a high priority role, like you were saying, the special clearance role, that I'll stay at the company. You never know. You could be a high performer, a hard worker, and a company can rug pull you, and then all of a sudden you're losing your job, right? And I think he was told that his job was high priority. But the thing is, with corporate speak, everything's high priority. You're super important here. We really appreciate your help. This is just BS that managers tell their employees just to keep them motivated to work hard without paying them more or really give them any real job security. Because if a company really wanted to give employees job security, they'll say we'll guarantee you a job in a contract that you sign for the next 2 years or 3 years. There's no guarantees. You have to work almost like a slave, endlessly looking for their approval and validation, and they're giving you no guarantees. They're going to promote you, give you a pay rise, or give you any income stability, right? So it's very difficult. And what ends up happening is, I think he mentioned, or other scenarios where your co-workers get fired, the boss might get fired, or the boss doesn't know you're going to get fired. When it comes to layoffs, everyone's going to play dumb, right? So your manager might know you're going to lose your job, but they're just going to pretend they don't know, and they'll only tell you in the last minute when HR gives them a go ahead. So I won't really trust anyone. Everyone tends to play dumb when most people might know the rumors, or they might know who's going to get a layoff. I remember scenarios whereby it was very clear that certain employees were less popular, and if there was a layoff, they'd be impacted, and it was obvious that when it came around time for layoffs, those were the first people to go, right? Or there's certain people that are everyone else is avoiding, and that's typically the rumors gone around, they're going to lose their job soon. The other thing is around the cope, right? And I'm not saying people can't start a side hustle or do something like that, but you've got to really invest a lot of time and effort into it. It's the same way, I know I've got a lot more to do in my channel in terms of growing, but it's something you got to commit to daily. You're going to put out a video every day or as often as you can. Are you going to manage clients? Are you going to focus on marketing, emails, a lead magnet, free ebooks, free emails, YouTube posts, free YouTube videos, things that I'm doing? Because he mentioned here that he has a Twitch channel, and I'm not knocking the guy. You can have a Twitch channel if you want to play video games or do other things. I saw a cool Twitch channel that is doing quite well, whereby someone is carving wooden ornaments. They think they're Native American, and they've got millions of views through carving wooden tables and wooden designs and little ornaments people can put in their house, like little figurines. And he's got quite a lot of views. And if you have something unique online, a unique level of experience or knowledge to share, then it makes sense to go ahead and do that. But everyone seems to have some kind of cult, oh, I'm going to become a millionaire on Twitch and things like that. Just be focused on what you're doing and really be committed to putting time in it. Because I think a lot of people give up because they don't really know what they're doing. They're just following the trend. Many people are gaming streamers. And how many people who play video games and stream it online are actually successful? How many people have something interesting and unique to say, right? And I remember loads of people set up TikToks. They were trying to sell things on TikTok Shop, trying to go viral. And so many people gave up when TikTok changed their ad revenue and things like that. If you're going to do something on social media, you got to be committed to it daily, and you got to keep trying your best, even when at times do get difficult. Sometimes I get burnt out. Many loyal viewers of the channel might see in September I didn't post as many videos as before, because you do deal with burnout and stress like that. So you got to bear that in mind if you're going to do that on the side while you have a job. Now, we got some interesting comments here, right? One interesting comment I want to focus on. Eunice Blue says, the first guy is talking about a special clearance and how he's the only one who could do that particular job that he was hired to do. No, you're not. They hired and fired your ass in 7 months. Someone else is doing that job before you, and someone else will do that job after you're done. You are replaceable. And that's what I'm saying, right? Don't believe, oh, you got special clearance to do this job, your high priority work, you're not going to get fired. The whole thing, it reminds me of the whole phrase when it comes to dating. In the red pill, they say, oh, she's not your girl, it's just your turn. It's the same thing with a company you're working for. It's not your loyal company, it's just your turn to work that job. And everyone's replaceable. And it reminds me, and if you want to look at this at a bigger scale, there are many documentaries that WWE do, the wrestling company, about behind the scenes. And many of the top names that have been there, John Cena, everyone knows John Cena, or Stone Cold Steve Austin, people like that, is very interesting that even though they're the top guy, they know how replaceable they are. They say this machine is going to keep going and everyone's a cog in the machine. Even if you're the top cog, you're still a cog in that machine. And that's what a lot of these guys notice. Even if they're the top guy making millions and millions of dollars for themselves and tens or hundreds of millions of dollars for the company through their merchandise and all their type of other promotion and advertisements and things like that, sponsorships, whatever it would be, they know how replaceable they are. So if you're working a job, you are kind of replaceable. The only way you're not replaceable is if you're self-employed and you're doing something quite unique, right? But everything else is kind of replaceable. So don't get too comfortable wherever you're at. Now let's listen to another story here.
I know I look ugly right now, but I don't even care, bro. I don't care. Yo, tell me why I just went to work today and was there probably an hour. They called me and my lab partner. They said, can you and us so come into the conference room with me? And right then, that moment, I knew we were cooked. Long story short, our positions have been eliminated. The worst part about all of this is I literally started that job because I came from a lab that I got laid off from because the company closed. So I literally have just been here just a little bit over a year. And here I am again, right back in the same freaking position, bro. I can't do this, bro. It took everything in me not to crash out in there on them folks because I am just so angry. I'm so tired. If it's not one thing, it's another, bro. And on top of that, I'm in the middle of trying to move too. I don't know what I'm gonna do now. I've been working in labs in Little Rock since 2021. There are no labs here for real that are paying more than $20 an hour. It took me for 3 months to find this job after I got laid off from my last job. I've worked in 5 different labs at this point. I don't know what to do. I don't know where to apply. I don't know. This is just too much. This is too freaking much for me.
So this is what I mean about people are crashing out, right? Because it's not just one little setback, it's one setback after the other. You get a layoff from one company, you move to another company, after a few months or a year, you get a layoff there. And I know many people who've dealt with that type of scenario. For example, I knew someone who's working in the healthcare sector and right around after the lockdowns, they got a layoff, started a job somewhere else, they got a layoff there. And this is within the space of just over 1 year. So let's just say within 1 year, they had 2 layoffs. And then what they started to do is do some freelance work on the side to supplement their income because it really did impact them. And thankfully in her case, I don't know about the person on the screen right now, but in her case and someone else I know, her husband was working a decent paying finance job, so she could kind of be subsidized by him. And she's recently pregnant, she recently had a baby, so I think she'll maybe take a step away from work. But this is the type of situation so many people are in. They're trying to really have some stability in their life and they can't. And even when they get the job, the pay isn't great, particularly in this kind of cost of living crisis with a high rate of inflation. If you can't have stability in your individual living situation, you can't really take steps forward to have kids, start a family, be in a stable relationship, spend more time socializing. You don't even feel comfortable socializing with friends when you are dealing with a layoff because you're so worried about your financial situation. You almost spend your life worrying about money, constantly starting from scratch, dealing with setback after setback, right? And then what ends up happening is, and I've covered this in other videos, is people become radicalized, right? They start looking for political solutions because the economy's failing them, the system's failing them, and that's when they go left wing or right wing and they become obsessed with that. There's only so far you can push people before there's social instability. Now there's a good little comment here on this. Wong Wu says, with all this uncertainty, it'd be foolish to move or relocate for a job that can be easily terminated at any moment. Then someone says, if you need work, right? And the whole point is, it's a difficult situation because I agree with not moving unless you really need the job, right? In this case, it sounds like she dealt with one layoff after the other, and she's moving. She's in the same location, Little Rock, she mentioned, but she's moving, relocating slightly, I guess, to be closer to her new job. And this is the type of thing, it's just so unstable. And I've had this conversation with some of my clients earlier on, I think earlier last year, where someone having a similar discussion whereby you're in whatever situation you're in now, and if you take one step forward in any direction, massive risk or things can really backfire. And I don't just mean looking for a job. Obviously you want to find a stable job. I help my clients with that, but also with other things. You have an opinion, you make a joke on social media, whatever, you could get cancelled. Even if you make a joke or make a little statement at work, people might interpret it the other way and go, oh, you're far right, or you're a conspiracy theorist or whatever. You get cancelled for that. You're in a relationship, it could work out, or you could deal with an expensive divorce or a false allegation. You're in other economic situations, you might invest and then it backfires. There's so many I understand everything involves some element of risk, but it seems like everything's so unstable. It makes sense why people are just job hugging, staying in the same jobs they're in, not moving forward. There's just a lack of progress when nothing has any stability to it. Now we're going to continue going to a few different examples here. Let's move on to this woman here.
Probably have a piece of your personal identity and your ego tied to your job. We have put these companies on pedestals for way too long, and I really hope that in the wake of all these layoffs, that people start to reconsider working for companies like this. I think it's a really good lesson to be learned that we are all disposable. If you are working for a company, that means you are on the chopping block. It's just a job, and no job or company should ever define you.
And she's making a good point. That's a very brief clip there, right? But you should emotionally detach from the job. Your job title is not your personal identity. There's only two things that matter when it comes to work: your money and your time, right? And as an extension of that, right, if you get a good job title, the leverage you use it to is to make more money at the company you're at, or make more money when you do job hop to another job. And what matters is your time to live your life however you want. So you're investing so you can retire early. You have more time by setting clear boundaries and starting and ending the workday at the same time, so you can have your evenings to yourself, or to focus on your side hustle, spend time with family, whatever it would be. And the other thing is, detaching from how fake everything is. And it's funny because I remember working at one American investment bank, and the guy I was working with had just joined from another bank, a European investment bank. And he gave me the backstory there, and it was kind of crazy. There was basically some internal infighting. He was doing one type of work, and essentially what happened was the team kind of split, and there was Bloods and the Crips. At this bank, they were two ganged up groups, and they got into a lot of infighting in terms of how to take their department forward. And he was on the losing side. And because he's on the losing side, when there were layoffs, he ended up losing his job. So when he started at the American investment bank, he was very detached, and he would sometimes say things that he probably shouldn't have said. Well, everything's fake anyway. It doesn't really matter. This isn't real anyway. This isn't the real world. He probably shouldn't say stuff like that, like on the trading floor when we're around other people like management and things. But he was like a guy who was slightly older, but working a more junior role because he'd fallen a bit behind in his career. And I don't think it bothered him because he had a decent low six-figure salary, and his wife was quite wealthy from a wealthy family. And they were settled with a big house and had 2 kids in a private school and things like that. So he wasn't stressing too much, but he'd kind of given up attachment of like, oh, if I work hard, it's going to pay off, or I care about my job title, because he's already doing it relatively well for himself. But the whole point is just realizing so many things are kind of out of your control. And he wasn't attached to, oh, I'm working for this brand name company at that point, because he's like done it and been through the motions now. It's more so just the stability he's providing for his kids. He does get some peripheral social status benefits from working for certain companies, big American investment banks, for example. And if you realize you're disposable and you're just an Excel line in a spreadsheet, you're kind of detached from it. You're just seen as an expense line item from your management perspective. And I always think about this because I never put too much stock in how other people perceive me beyond what was relevant for my job. But I realized how some co-workers, typically like mid-management, senior management, they'd be very close to each other socially. And I realized that's because they had to play that office politics to stay there and to keep their job stability, to almost treat their co-workers like friends and hang out with them and things like that. At those more senior levels, it's almost essential to all have the same political opinions. We all hate the right wingers. We hate Brexit. We hate Trump. That was the typical talking points they'd have. We support the climate change agenda, feminism, whatever it would be, right? And I realized that they had to play that game, and that was important for their job stability. But at the same time, even though they were more buddy and more friends, if the time came and they had to lay off one of their juniors, they would do that, right? One of their close allies, they would do that. I remember two guys who were best friends at work. One was slightly senior than the other. A bit ironic because the younger guy was a lot more senior than the older guy. But when it came to layoff season, basically he had to lay off his friend. Even though they'd go on holidays together with their friends to San Francisco, to wherever they would go, they had the same friend group essentially, right? And it really reminded me of, at the end of the day, things are so cutthroat, right? Even friends can't look out for friends really when it comes to layoffs and things like that, when it really gets tough times for a company. So she's got a good point about not being too attached to your job. Now let's listen to one little comment here from this Chinese woman. I think she's Chinese.
So currently, because of all the layoffs, I have a few friends that are interviewing, and for one of the interviews that my friend went to, she had to do a Draw My Life series for an interview for an IoT company. And it's very funny because I don't even know what I would say in that Draw My Life series that would make me a compelling candidate for that company. Do I just draw my life and tell them, hey, ever since I was a little girl, I really wanted to bring shareholder value and hit the KPIs and optimize our OKRs for the organization? I don't know what they want to hear, especially if they're asking for something so ludicrous. And I feel like with the interview process now, they are being way more picky and going through way more rounds. And you got to do stuff like, I don't know, tell them your whole life story in order to get a job. And you have to tell them something super compelling and almost lie to them and say, I've always dreamed of working at this IoT company.
So she's making a good point here, right? She's talking about how pointless the interview process is. And then sometimes she mentioned at an interview, some of her friends who are doing interviews for some tech companies, one of the examples interview questions was to draw your life on one A4 page. Now that sounds ridiculous. Why would you want to have to draw your life? Surely if you're going for a tech interview, they're going to ask you some technical skills, some skills about your experience, some of your people skills and why you want to work for the company, your relevant skills for the role, type of things that would come up. But if they're asking you to draw your life, this goes back to my point that I've made in recent videos, how long and obsessive they are with these interview processes, because they know so many people are out of a job, so they're being so picky about picking someone to hire to the point where they're actually leading you to answer all these type of pointless interview questions, right? Now, if I had a job interview and they're asking me to draw my life, right, was, again, you got a good point, how would you do it? I would have it somewhat aligned with my resume, because when you write your resume, you want to have a narrative, which what I mean by that is that a consistent story across your resume from start to finish. And I work with my clients on this through coaching, that it shows what is the next step in your career is the natural next step. You're not going from, I don't know, working in the medical field to working in tech to working in finance without there being a clear through line. And typically that wouldn't be those extreme switches. But if you're going to make career pivots, it's going to show you're generally moving in that direction. If you want to move into tech, for example, from finance, you went from finance, you worked in a tech department of a finance company, you did a tech boot camp, you've worked on other projects and have a portfolio yourself, then you go and do a job interview there. That's how I would draw my life if I was going to do it, rather than go all the way back to your early childhood, right? So it is clicky, time wasting nonsense she's pointing out, right? And I just think, like I say, the narrative should be where you started your career to where you are now, where you started your college education to what's the next step in your career. That's the way you should do it. She's got a good point here. Now we're going to go through some of these articles that are going to talk about some of the layoffs here, mainly Meta's 4,000 layoffs. And then we're going to go through how difficult it is to get hired in tech right now, which reflects the broader job market. Firstly, we're going to go through 4,000 layoffs. So Meta, which is of course Facebook essentially, and they went through tons of layoffs. So let's see what we can learn from them. Meta axed or laid off 4,000 employees. LinkedIn turned into a wall of ex-Meta staff. So many Facebook staff, let's just use the word Facebook because it sounds more relatable than Meta, right? So many people were dealing with a layoff, and then they went on LinkedIn and saying you got good performance reviews, they smashed targets, but they still went through a layoff, which again shows you how heartless companies are. You can be a high performer and still be subject to a layoff. Here it says there wasn't just a mass layoff. Essentially what happened, there was an uncomfortable truth. If you're going to fire thousands of people, it's normally a sign you've been asleep at the wheel. Now what it's saying here is that if Meta or Facebook is going to be firing 4,000 people out of suddenly, then what's going on? It typically means the company's been mismanaged for some time. They must have overhired people at such a dramatic level. They may have so many jobs that in their company that aren't really generating money. And I think this is due to an unstable economy where you had this rapid upswing around the lockdowns when it started of hiring and tech growth to tech kind of contraction in the industry with higher interest rates, less investments, and it kind of ruined everything. I think something about the lockdowns after 2020, that time period, it exposed everything as being fake, how many jobs were fake, how many jobs were just make busy work, how the office is daycare for adults. So many people had jobs that didn't really need to be done. I covered this in recent videos where I talked about how people were fired from Twitter or X because they weren't really doing much work and they were just there to essentially be like the HR Karens and just have DEI hires for the sake of it. The hidden cost of keeping underperformers. Let's be honest, keeping low performers around feels safe in the long term. There's no tough conversations, no awkward exits, but it's a slow moving disaster. Productivity sinks and moral nosedives, and you carry a lot of dead weight, right? And I think there's some truth to that where companies do carry the underperformers, but what I noticed, it's not always the underperformers who are fired from a job, who are subject to a layoff, because sometimes good employees were hired and fired due to the market or industry expanding and then contracting. So you have some good employees fired, and some of the employees who are kept are low performers, but they're perceived as the manager's favorite and they keep their job. And I see that time and time again. Here it says here, if you want to keep people and keep the right people at a company, set clear expectations, keep people accountable, have regular performance conversations with them so people don't reach the end of the year and all of a sudden they think they've been doing their good job and then the manager gives them a negative performance review. And I've definitely been in that situation whereby I was doing my job, no real negative feedback throughout the year, and then one particular time at the end of the year they came up with all this negative points. Oh, my emails are too long. Oh, I have too many bullet points on an email. There was one small detail on a presentation that they think should be reworded. And I'm like, you're putting this in my end of year performance review and keeping my bonus flat. We had a whole year to discuss any of these points. Most of the points you're mentioning are from the middle of summer, about a 3-week period, 3-month period roughly, let's just say July, August, September, and a bit of October. So it's like, why are you giving me this feedback in my performance review in January the next year, or December, January, and give me a flat bonus and giving me a pay rise? I could have flagged this earlier, and I did discuss these things with my direct management, one of those points, and they didn't give me any critical feedback or change any of the wording. And with regards to my emails being long or having too many bullet points, how is that justification for low pay? It just doesn't make sense. And this is the type of situations you have to deal with, right? You have to deal with people providing a lack of clarity for you. That's why you should always check in with your manager. Am I on track? Is there anything I could do differently? Things like that throughout the year. So you're not stuck with a bad performance review, or when they're doing layoffs last minute, they just throw your name in with everyone else. And you think this is an organized, structured process. It's not really. Often they might have layoffs coming up, rumors of layoffs, the managers start to making lists of low performers and things like that. And all of a sudden you're just dealing with a situation where you're getting low performance reviews and then subject to a layoff. But if you look out for the signs early, you can really avoid a lot of these situations. Then it says here, daily huddles, weekly check-ins, make it a habit, have more conversations. You want to eliminate the surprise underperformance review, look at the results, any big problems, try to flag them early, tackle them early, and course correct in real time, right? And this is what I recommend you do too, right? It's not just management. This is really targeted at management, flagging low performers early, but also you look out for signs of things that might not be going so well. Here it says here, not every performance issue is a firing offense. Sometimes it's burnout, misalignment, or personal struggles. Before you think about a layoff, think about what's going on with a person, resources, coaching, or clarity. Is that what they need? The thing is, this is a good idea, this little point here, that managers need to be more supportive of you, but they're not really cared about that. They cared about profit, they cared about looking good to their management. So in some cases, they're ruthless in terms of firing you, even if you don't deserve it, having favoritism and favorite employees who get more chances to make more mistakes versus you. I've seen that all the time. You'll see some kind of low quality employee who's a manager's favorite and they make tons of mistakes. They don't know what they're talking about and they're getting preferential treatment over you. Next, it says that managers need to be more transparent. Layoffs should not come as a shock. Employees should know what decisions are being made, what's being expected of them. Companies should operate in secrecy and tell people at the last minute they're dealing with a layoff. It leads to resentment, distrust, and a PR disaster. Now, this type of thing from the shitheads at HR Magazine, right? And these type of HR official sites, your official HR department, the HR Karens, the typical corporate wording, official Forbes, Business Insider, whatever type of websites and stuff. They're obviously going to give you the dumb corporate propaganda, right? Now, obviously, a company is not going to give you a heads up many months in advance before they formally announce a layoff to you and ask you to quickly sign the paperwork within a week if you want to get the layoff money, the layoff package, right? What they're going to do is tell you at the last minute. So this type of ridiculous things, oh, we're a HR magazine, and the HR magazine has HR people who used to work in HR writing the magazine, so obviously they know this is corporate mumbo jumbo, corporate jargon, corporate lies. Layoffs shouldn't come as a shock. Employees should know. Companies should operate in secrecy. Otherwise, if they tell you last minute about a layoff, it's going to make you resentful and distrusting and a PR disaster because the employees are going to be caught off guard. Obviously, they're going to continue doing that, right? Obviously, the companies are not going to give you a heads up about a layoff a long time in advance. And that's why I'm here as a career coach, to help you pick up on those signs, help you look for those signs and plan for your exit if that's what you need to do, depending on your scenario. Here it says that leadership should be accountable, no secret decision making, no discussing employees behind their backs, no dodging hard conversations. Now, this is completely delusional. We all know leadership are going to have secretive decision making, who to hire, who to fire, who to promote, who's the favorite, who they don't like, who they're going to gossip about. No discussing employees behind their backs. Like I say, that's completely unrealistic. That's how the corporate world works. No dodging hard conversations. Now, we know everything in the corporate world is about indirect communication, passive aggressiveness, people not saying things to your face, people giving you a type of feedback where you have to ask 3 times for clarity. What actually do you mean there? Can you clarify that point? What steps do I need to take for a promotion? Can we break it down into actionable items rather than just, oh, you need to get the support of senior management. You need to be more of a team player. Can we actually break that down, what that means? Do you get what I mean? And this is the typical corporate nonsense. So if we keep moving forward, let's check out about the Business Insider, right? So Business Insider has 3 charts telling you how difficult it is in the job market. It says here in the job market, in the tech industry, but overall, there's low hiring and low firing in the job market, which means less people are getting hired, and in certain cases, less people are getting fired, which means there's just not a lot of movement in the job market, people moving from one company to the other. And especially rough if you're in tech, there's less promotions, higher unemployment, and less job postings. And AI is one contributing factor, but there's other factors too. The report says that AI could be stalling a rebound due to, in terms of the job search, in terms of finding other jobs. But again, there's other factors here, right? So this guy, Bernard, the expert, is saying the tech sector is experiencing overhang for early overhiring. Also, there were higher interest rates that are impacting the job market too, in terms of companies don't have low interest rates to invest more and grow their industry, grow their companies. There's rising inflation, less people who are spending money in the economy. So financing big speculative investments in the new tech sector is quite risky. People go for safer investments when the economy is a bit more unstable. So let's go through this in a bit of detail in terms of some of the graphs. So essentially, this first little graph is a bit confusing, but essentially what it's saying, through all occupations, the job market's doing a lot better than compared to compared to the tech industry. So for example, the unemployment rate is generally 3.7 to 4.7 in 2018 to 2023 for the younger demographic, but for the computer and maths, it's 1.7 to 3.5. It's a bit of a ridiculous way they've tried to demonstrate it here, but just put simply, the unemployment rate is quite high when it comes to some of the sectors like tech careers, right, compared to other careers. And the other thing I wanted to point out here is that how the industry is changing over time. If we look at promotion rates by industry, right, this is quite interesting because I've been talking a lot about layoffs, but of course, if you're staying in the same job and you're worried about switching to another job due to job hugging, you want to stay safe, stable job, then of course you want to still increase your salary, still get promoted. But you can see the promotion rates are quite low by industry, right? So you can see here the technology promotion rate is minus 7.4, right? For technology, for food, beverage, for retail, all of these particular industries, professional services, have relatively low levels of promotion, right? And all of these markets, right, all of these industries are having low rates of promotion, but particularly in the tech sector. So you get stuck in a job, not getting pay rises, can't progress, can't job hop, and people are really suffering in this type of economy. The recent report says that the knowledge economy sectors, primarily white-collar jobs, usually absorb college graduates, but they've scaled back in hiring, and they suggest they find a new lower level of employment, which means companies are doing and operating at the same level but hiring less employees, which is definitely difficult for younger people who are trying to progress in their industry and move up, but they can't even get promoted and they can't even actually move up in terms of find a new job. Particularly if you're brand new out of university and you're trying to push forward, you end up stuck in a situation you can't get into the job market, and if you work in the job market you can't even get promoted. So it's kind of difficult for people out there pushing forward with their standard job. And just to finish up here, you can see that from the US job postings, how overall job postings have gone down. So it makes sense why it's harder to find jobs because less jobs are being advertised. But you see, particularly for tech, the job market has gone down in terms of advertised jobs. You can see the difference there. If the overall jobs have gone down from being at 100 in 2020 to 150 job postings back in 2022, all the way down to about 100, right, which would be back to before the lockdown situation back in early 2020. But then if you look at the tech sector, it's the job market really peaked at a very high point around 2022 and then drastically moved down to almost 50%. So it's like the tech sector is hiring at 50% of the rate of the rest of the job market. So it really is a difficult time. Now, if you relate to some of the stories we've covered here and you're dealing with a difficult situation in terms of your job search, the way I can help you is really firstly help with those promotions too that we went through at the end in terms of lack of promotion, how you can get promoted, how to play the office politics the correct way. It also comes down to doing your job search effectively. And this is what I help throughout my career coaching to help you build more power, pay and freedom. So you're not just another number in an Excel file, another disposable employee. You've really built a solid career that gives you the stability you're looking for over the long term. Let me know if you relate to some of the stories in this video. 2 recommended videos on the screen right now. I'll respond to your comments shortly. See you next time.